Karen parked her massive RV right in front of my driveway, claimed she had exclusive HOA access to my property, and refused to move it for an entire week, even when I had a medical emergency. Let's dive right into this absolutely insane story. And trust me, you won't believe how this one ends. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. I know a lot of you have dealt with difficult neighbors before, but this situation was on a whole different level. Imagine coming home from work one day to find a 35-foot luxury RV completely blocking your driveway. And when you politely ask the owner to move it, she not only refuses, but starts screaming about how she's on the HOA board and has exclusive rights to use your property as her personal RV parking spot. Yeah, that actually happened, and it gets even crazier from there. I want to give you guys a quick preview of what you're about to hear. This story involves fake HOA documents, security camera footage that you won't believe, the police being called multiple times, and even an emergency helicopter situation. I'm not kidding. Plus, wait until you hear what happened when this Karen tried to take me to court. The judge's reaction was absolutely priceless. But here's what makes this story really special. It's not just about dealing with an entitled neighbor. It's about standing up for yourself when someone tries to bully you. And believe me, this Karen tried every trick in the book. She even got her Facebook group involved and tried to turn the whole neighborhood against me. But karma? Oh, karma. Hit her harder than anyone could have expected. I've been holding on to this story for a while, waiting for everything to be legally settled before I could share it with you. Now that it's all over, I can finally tell you the complete insane saga of the RV Karen, who thought she could just take over my property and learned a very expensive lesson in the process. For those of you who are new to my channel, I live in a nice suburban neighborhood in Colorado. It's one of those areas where most people are really friendly and look out for each other. We do have an HOA, but it's generally pretty reasonable, or at least it was, until Karen got elected to the board and decided she was basically the queen of the neighborhood. This whole situation started about 6 months ago, but the aftermath is still ongoing. I've got text messages, security camera footage, and court documents to share with you throughout this story. Trust me, you'll want to see the evidence because some of this stuff is so outrageous that you wouldn't believe it without proof. I'm going to tell you this story exactly as it happened, and I'll be including all the juicy details that I had to leave out when this was still going through the legal system. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this became known as the RV incident in our neighborhood, and why 3 HOA board members ended up resigning. So grab your snacks, get comfortable, and let's dive into this story. And make sure you stick around until the end because the karma in this one, chef's kiss, absolutely perfect. Quick heads up, any legal experts watching this, I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments because some of the laws Karen tried to quote, well, let's just say she might have been getting her legal advice from some interesting sources. This all started in Summit Ridge, Colorado, one of those picturesque neighborhoods nestled right against the Rocky Mountains. You know the type, where the houses are nice but not overly fancy, and most people moved here for the mountain views and that small-town community feel. I've actually received permission from my lawyer to share this story now that everything's been settled in court. And trust me, you'll understand why legal permission was necessary when you hear what happened. For those wondering about the timing, this whole saga began in June of last year, right when everyone was getting their RVs and campers ready for summer vacation season. Our neighborhood has about 220 homes, and while we do have an HOA, it was traditionally pretty laid back. The main rules were common sense stuff. Keep your lawn maintained, don't paint your house neon colors, that kind of thing. We even had specific guidelines about temporary RV parking because so many residents here are outdoor enthusiasts. Now I should mention that my house sits at what we call the premium corner of the neighborhood. It's one of those lots that the original developers positioned perfectly. I've got an extra-wide driveway that curves around to my 3-car garage, and my property backs up to a small community green space. This becomes really important later in the story, because apparently this prime location caught Karen's eye long before she made her move. I've actually gathered all the documentation from this incident: HOA meeting minutes, police reports, security camera footage, and even the court transcripts. I had to wait until everything was legally resolved before sharing this, but now I can show you exactly how this situation spiraled from a simple parking dispute into what our local newspaper eventually dubbed the Summit Ridge RV standoff. For context, our HOA board had recently gone through some changes. 3 months before this incident, we had a special election because 2 board members moved away. That's when Karen, let's call her Mountain View Karen, since that was literally her complaint in one of her Facebook rants, got herself elected to the board. She ran on this platform of maintaining property values and stricter enforcement of community standards. Little did we know what she really meant by that. Some of you might be wondering why I didn't know about Karen before this incident, especially since she was on the HOA board. Well, that's because she had only moved to our neighborhood about 6 months earlier. She bought one of the larger houses on Elk Ridge Drive, you know, the kind with the 3-story windows and massive garage. Within weeks of moving in, she was already attending every HOA meeting and volunteering for every committee. At the time, people thought she was just being enthusiastic about her new community. Turns out, she had very different motivations. I've got the previous owner's permission to share this detail. Karen had actually tried to buy my house when it was on the market 3 years ago, but her offer was rejected because it was significantly below asking price. This is something I only found out during the legal proceedings, and it explains so much about what happened next. Apparently, she had been plotting to get revenge ever since, and getting on the HOA board was just part of her master plan. 2. Really interesting thing is that this whole situation would have played out very differently if our regular HOA president hadn't been on vacation when it all started. He was on a 2-week cruise in Alaska, completely unreachable, which left Karen as the acting board president. And boy, did she take advantage of that temporary power. I've also gotten permission from my neighbors to share some of their security camera footage later in this story, which captures some absolutely unbelievable moments. You'll see exactly how Karen tried to manipulate everyone around her, and trust me, some of these clips are just, well, you'll have to see them to believe them. Before I get into what exactly happened that first day, I should mention that everything I'm about to share has been verified through either police reports, court documents, or video evidence. I know some of this might sound too crazy to be true, and believe me, I wouldn't have believed it either if I hadn't lived through it. But I've got proof for every single claim I'm about to make. Now I should probably tell you a bit about my property and why it became the center of this whole drama. My house has been in our family since the neighborhood was first developed back in 1992. My parents were actually one of the first families to build here, and they chose this lot specifically because of its unique layout. When I bought the house from them 5 years ago, they made me promise to keep it in the family. If they knew what was coming, they probably would have added, "And don't let any crazy RV driving Karens take it over," to that promise. The property itself is pretty special. It sits on a corner lot at the intersection of Mountain View Drive and Eagle Ridge Road, with about an acre of land. The driveway is one of those curved ones that gives you 2 entry points, one on each street. This design was intentional because my dad used to run his small business from home and sometimes had delivery trucks coming in. The setup lets vehicles pull through instead of having to back out onto the main road, What makes this property even more unique is that it has what the original developers called a view easement. Basically, there's a protected green space behind my house that can never be built on because it preserves everyone's mountain views. This easement runs along the back of my property, and I maintain it as part of an agreement with the HOA. I've got a beautiful garden back there, Bird. Vidas, I work as a and even a small seating area where I often work, which means I'm home most days. I've also got a side gig as a volunteer EMT with our local mountain rescue team. This becomes really important later in the story because my emergency response vehicle needs to be ready to go at a moment's notice. That's actually one of the reasons why keeping my driveway clear is so crucial. I never know when I might get called out for an emergency. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. Over the years, I've made some significant improvements to the property. I've got a state-of-the-art security system with cameras covering every angle. Thank goodness for that foresight. And last year, I had the driveway redone with this beautiful stamped concrete that cost a small fortune. There's also a custom gate system that I had installed after a series of porch pirates started hitting our neighborhood. Again, all of this comes into play later in the story. The thing about my property that really seemed to drive Karen crazy was the RV pad I had installed 2 years ago. It's a proper concrete pad with full hookups, water, electric and sewer that I put in so my parents could visit with their RV and stay for extended periods. The HOA approved it unanimously. I got all the proper permits, and it's actually set back from the street so it's barely visible to neighbors. I even planted a row of evergreens around it for additional screening. What's ironic is that I rarely use the RV pad myself, maybe 3 or 4 times a year when my parents visit, or occasionally when friends come through on their way to the national parks. The rest of the time it just sits there empty. Well, it used to sit empty until Karen decided it was her personal parking spot. I should also mention that I've always been active in our community, but in a much more low-key way than Karen. I serve on the Neighborhood Emergency Preparedness Committee, help organize the annual Community Cleanup Day, and maintain the neighborhood's emergency response plan. I'm telling you this because it becomes relevant when Karen tried to paint me as this antisocial hermit who doesn't contribute to the community. Another important detail is that I keep meticulous records of everything related to my property. Every HOA approval, every permit, every modification, it's all carefully documented and filed away. My dad taught me the importance of this when I bought the house, and let me tell you, this habit saved me thousands of dollars when this whole RV situation went to court. The layout of my property also includes a dedicated turnaround area that's crucial for emergency vehicles. This was actually a requirement when I got my EMT certification. I needed to ensure that emergency vehicles could access and leave the property quickly if needed. Karen's RV blockade didn't just inconvenience me, it potentially put other people at risk, which is something the judge later found particularly concerning. Life in Summit Ridge was pretty peaceful before all this happened. Our neighborhood had a really good system for handling RVs and campers. Residents could park them for up to 48 hours for loading and unloading, and if you needed longer, you just had to submit a simple request form to the HOA. Most people were reasonable about it, and we rarely had any issues. I actually have some security camera footage from the week before this all started, which shows just how normal everything was. You can see my neighbor Tom using my RV pad for a few hours while he cleaned his camper. He'd asked permission, of course, and even brought over some fresh-baked cookies his wife made as a thank you. That's just the kind of neighborhood we were. The HOA meetings were usually pretty boring, discussing things like seasonal flower plantings and whether we should upgrade the playground equipment. Karen had only been to 3 meetings before she got elected to the board, but she managed to convince enough people that we needed stronger leadership to win a spot. Looking back, there were some red flags we all missed. For instance, about 2 weeks before the RV incident, Karen started doing these weird property inspections. She'd walk around the neighborhood with a clipboard, taking notes and photos of everyone's houses. At the time, we thought she was just being overzealous in her new HOA role. Nobody realized she was actually scouting out potential parking spots for her brand new 35-foot luxury RV that she hadn't told anyone she was buying. My relationship with the HOA had always been positive. I'd served as the board secretary a few years back, so I knew all the rules inside and out. In fact, I'd helped write some of the current parking regulations. The previous board president, Mike, used to joke that my property was the model home for how to handle RV parking properly. Everything was up to code, professionally installed, and thoughtfully landscaped. A typical day for me back then involved working from my home office, which has a perfect view of the driveway and RV pad. I'd usually see the regular parade of dog walkers, joggers, and kids on bikes passing by. Sometimes people would stop to admire the landscaping or wave hello. The neighborhood kids knew they could always count on me for Band-Aids or ice pops. If they took a spill while skating or biking, I had a pretty good relationship with all my immediate neighbors too. Sarah and Bob to the left, retired teachers who loved gardening. The Johnsons to the right, with their 3 kids, who sometimes helped me wash my emergency response vehicle. Even the people whose properties backed up to the green space behind my house. We all got along great and often coordinated our landscaping efforts. The community actually used to use my driveway as a turnaround point during the annual Halloween parade and Christmas light tours. My circular drive made it perfect for the hayride trailer to loop around safely. I'd always decorate extra special for these events, and my house was even featured in the local paper's Holiday Lights section last year. Karen moved in during what we call the quiet season, that period between winter and spring when most people are just starting to think about outdoor projects. She seemed normal enough at first, though she did make some comments during HOA meetings about how certain properties weren't living up to community standards. Nobody thought much of it at the time. There's always someone who wants to be a bit stricter about the rules. I had exactly 2 interactions with Karen before the RV incident. Once at the community spring cleanup day, where she spent most of the time talking about her previous neighborhood and how much better they did things there. And once when she stopped by my house to ask about the RV pad installation process, which, in hindsight, should have been another red flag. The really interesting thing is that just a week before everything kicked off, we had a community emergency response training session in my driveway. The fire department came out to demonstrate proper emergency vehicle access protocols, and Karen was there. She saw firsthand how important it was to keep the driveway clear for emergency vehicles. She even signed the attendance sheet and got a certificate of completion. The irony of what she did later, well, it didn't help her case in court. Everything changed on a Tuesday morning in June. I remember the exact date because I had an important video conference scheduled with clients in Europe. I was in my home office at around 7:30 a.m. when I heard what sounded like a massive diesel engine idling outside. At first, I didn't think much of it. We occasionally get delivery trucks in the neighborhood, and I was focused on preparing for my meeting, but then I heard this loud beeping, that backup warning sound that large vehicles make. It kept going for several minutes, which was unusual enough to make me look out my office window. What I saw made me do a double take. This enormous, brand new luxury life RV, easily 35 feet long, was attempting to back into my driveway. And not just onto the RV pad. This person was trying to position it right in front of my garage doors. I grabbed my phone and rushed outside, still in my business casual outfit, since I had that video meeting coming up. As I got closer, I could see Karen in the driver's seat, with some guy I'd never seen before trying to guide her in. She was wearing this ridiculous captain's hat, like she was steering a yacht instead of blocking someone's driveway. My security cameras caught everything that happened next, and believe me, you'll want to see this footage. The timestamp shows 7:43 a.m. when I first stepped outside, and you can clearly see how Karen had already managed to scrape one of my decorative boulder landscaping rocks with her RV's bumper, leaving a nice long scratch on her pristine vehicle. Now, here's where it gets interesting. Before I could even say anything, Karen's parking assistant, who I later found out was her personal RV instructor she'd hired for the day, spots me and immediately starts shaking his head. You can hear him on the security footage saying, "Mom, I don't think this is a good idea. This appears to be private property." Karen's response? She just waves him off and keeps backing up. Picked up the next part perfectly. The RV instructor actually walks over to me and quietly says, "I'm so sorry. I just met her this morning. She told me this was her property and she was practicing parking in her own driveway. I'll be noting this incident in my official instruction report." Then he quickly packed up his safety vest and clipboard and literally speed-walked to his car. Smart man. Meanwhile, Karen had managed to position her massive RV diagonally across my driveway, effectively blocking both entrance points. Remember that curved driveway I mentioned earlier? She'd somehow managed to angle the RV so perfectly that it was impossible for any vehicle to get in or out from either street. It was actually impressive, in a horrifying sort of way. My security cameras show that it took her exactly 7 attempts to get the RV into that position. 7. And during each attempt she got closer and closer to hitting my garage doors. You can actually hear the RV instructor on the footage progressively losing his cool, going from polite suggestions to practically begging her to stop before he finally gave up and left. While all this was happening, I was standing there trying to process what I was seeing. I had that video conference in less than 15 minutes. My emergency response vehicle was now blocked in the garage, and there was a massive RV doing its best impression of a roadblock in my driveway. And Karen, she hadn't even acknowledged my presence yet. The timestamp on my driveway camera shows 7:52 a.m. when Karen finally emerges from her RV. She's got this smug look on her face, still wearing that ridiculous captain's hat, and she's carrying what looked like a stack of papers. As she struts down her RV steps, yes, struts is the right word here, she's actually humming some kind of tune, like this was just the most normal thing in the world, the most surreal part. She had one of those extending camping chairs tucked under her arm. You know, the kind people take to their kids' soccer games. Without saying a word to me, she sets up this chair right next to her RV, pulls out a magazine, and starts acting like she's at a beach resort. All while I'm standing there in my business clothes, watching this absurd scene unfold on my own driveway. My security system has this feature that automatically takes snapshots when there's significant movement in the driveway. Looking back through the alerts now, you can see the exact moment I realized this wasn't going to be a simple misunderstanding. It's right when Karen pulls out a thermos of coffee and one of those little folding side tables to go with her chair. She was settling in for the long haul. With my video conference starting in just minutes, I knew I had to address this situation quickly. The security footage shows the timestamp at 7:56 a.m. when I first approached Karen. I made sure to keep my phone recording in my pocket, something I'd learned to do from previous HOA disputes, though nothing quite like this. "Excuse me," I said, trying to keep my voice professional and calm, "but you need to move your RV immediately. This is private property, and you're blocking access to my garage." Karen lowered her magazine and looked at me over her designer sunglasses. Her response, a laugh, not just a chuckle, but one of those exaggerated theatrical laughs that people use when they're trying to be condescending. "Oh, honey," she said, taking a slow sip from her thermos, "I don't think you understand. I'm the acting HOA president, and I've designated this as an official RV parking zone." She reached for that stack of papers I mentioned earlier and held up what looked like an official HOA document, though I couldn't read it from where I was standing. "That's not possible," I replied. "This is my private driveway, and I have an approved RV pad that's registered with the HOA. You can't just declare it a public parking zone." Karen's response was something I'll never forget, and thankfully it's captured perfectly on my security cameras with audio. Actually, according to Section 7.3 of the HOA bylaws, which I'm sure you've never bothered to read, the board president has emergency authority to designate temporary parking solutions during the peak summer season. And since our neighborhood's RV lot is under renovation, I cut her off right there. There is no renovation of the neighborhood RV lot. I was at the last board meeting, and nothing like that was discussed or approved. That's when Karen pulled out what she claimed was an emergency board resolution, a document that she'd clearly created herself, complete with a clip art HOA logo at the top. The document stated that due to urgent summer parking needs and community welfare concerns, certain private driveways could be temporarily redesignated as community parking zones. My security camera caught her exact words as she waved this paper around. "As acting president, I've determined that your unnecessarily large driveway and barely used RV pad are now community resources. You should be thankful. I'm helping you contribute to the neighborhood instead of just hoarding all this space for yourself." I tried to explain about my emergency response vehicle and the upcoming video conference, but Karen just kept talking over me. "If you have a problem with this, you can file a formal complaint with the HOA board." Oh wait, that's me right now. She actually giggled after saying this. The next part is crucial, and I made sure to repeat it clearly for my recording. "Karen, I am formally telling you that you are trespassing on private property. You have no authority to commandeer my driveway, and I need you to move your RV immediately." Her response was to pull out her phone and start recording me. Everyone, this is a perfect example of the selfish attitude I'm dealing with as HOA president. This homeowner is refusing to comply with emergency community measures and is displaying aggressive behavior. I wasn't being aggressive at all. The security footage clearly shows me standing calmly with my hands in my pockets about 10 feet away from her, but Karen was putting on quite a performance for her phone camera. "Additionally," she continued, still narrating to her phone, "I've noticed several violations of HOA guidelines on this property, including unauthorized landscaping and non-approved security cameras. As acting president, I'll be issuing fines for these violations unless the homeowner cooperates with our temporary parking solution." By this point, it was 8:03 a.m. My video conference was starting in just minutes. I had to make a quick decision: either miss my important meeting and keep dealing with this situation, or step away temporarily and handle it after my call. Looking at my security cameras, I could see several neighbors had come out to watch what was happening, which actually worked in my favor later as witnesses. I decided to be professional about it. "Karen, I have a work commitment right now, but let me be very clear. You need to move your RV immediately. If it's still here when I finish my meeting, I'll have no choice but to call the police and have it towed." Her response? She just waved her hand dismissively, put her earbuds in, and went back to her magazine, but not before announcing to her phone camera. And now we see the typical entitled behavior, making threats and refusing to engage in community-oriented dialogue. My video conference lasted exactly 47 minutes. I know, because my security cameras were recording everything that happened outside during that time. And let me tell you, Karen was busy during those 47 minutes. The footage shows her making at least 6 different Facebook Live videos, all while parading around my driveway like she was giving a tour of her new vacation property. But that wasn't even the worst part. Around 8:30 a.m., my doorbell camera caught her making phone calls to other RV owners in the neighborhood. I could clearly hear her saying things like, "Yes, I've secured us the perfect spot. No, don't worry about permission. I'm the acting HOA president. Bring your RV over as soon as you can." By the time my meeting ended at 8:50 a.m., there were 3 more RVs circling the neighborhood, obviously looking for a place to park. My next-door neighbor, Sarah, bless her heart, had been watching everything and started recording on her phone too. She caught Karen trying to direct one of these RVs onto my landscape side yard. Thank goodness the driver had more sense and refused. I immediately started documenting everything. I took photos of Karen's supposed emergency resolution document, which was riddled with spelling errors and clearly printed on her home printer. I also started saving all the social media posts she was making in real time. She had created a Facebook group called Summit Ridge RV Community and was live streaming her self-proclaimed revolution against driveway hoarding. The security footage from my side camera shows Karen making a show of measuring my driveway with a tape measure, all while narrating to her phone. As we can see, this selfish homeowner has over 2,000 square feet of paved space that they're refusing to share with the community. This is exactly the kind of behavior that's destroying property values. Around 9:15 a.m., things took an even more bizarre turn. Karen started putting up handmade signs along my driveway. She'd obviously prepared these in advance. They were laminated and everything. The signs read things like Community RV Parking Zone and HOA Approved Parking Area, Inquire Within. She even had the audacity to tape her business card to my mailbox with RV Parking Coordinator written on it in marker. I started taking photos of everything, including the growing scrape marks her RV was leaving on my stamped concrete driveway. That's when Karen decided to up her game. She went into her RV and came out with what looked like official citation forms, the kind the real HOA uses for violations. She started filling them out, walking around my property with her clipboard. My security camera caught her muttering to herself as she wrote, "Unauthorized security cameras, non-compliant bird feeders, excessive garden ornaments." She was literally making up violations on the spot. When she got to my emergency response vehicle, she actually wrote a citation for unauthorized commercial vehicle storage, despite the fact that emergency vehicles are explicitly exempt in our HOA bylaws. By 9:30 a.m., she had posted 7 different violations to my front door, each with a $250 fine attached. The best part? She'd signed them all as Karen last name, Emergency Powers HOA President. Yes, she actually wrote Emergency Powers as part of her title. I made sure to carefully remove each citation using gloves and put them in plastic sleeves. Evidence. That would later prove very useful. Things got even more intense when she spotted me taking photos through my window. She immediately started another Facebook Live video, claiming I was stalking and harassing her while she performed her official HOA duties. The irony was completely lost on her, apparently. Around 9:45 a.m., she crossed another line. My security cameras caught her trying to access my RV pad's electrical hookup with an extension cord from her RV. When she couldn't figure out how to access the locked utility box, she actually called an electrician. I could hear her on the phone. "Yes, I need someone to come out immediately. I'm the HOA president, and we need to access a homeowner's RV hookups for community use." Thankfully, the electrician she called happened to be the same guy who had installed my RV pad. He called me immediately to give me a heads up about the strange request. When I explained the situation, he agreed to come out, not to help Karen, but to document any damage she might try to cause to the electrical system. By 10:00 a.m., my phone was blowing up with texts from neighbors. Karen's Facebook Live videos were causing quite a stir in our community's social media groups. Some people were confused, others were outraged, and a few were actually starting to believe her claims about having official HOA authority. I knew I needed to act fast before this situation spiraled even further out of control. At 10:15 a.m., I made my first call to the police non-emergency line. The dispatcher seemed a bit confused by the situation at first. I mean, it's not every day you get a call about someone claiming emergency HOA powers to commandeer a private driveway. I made sure to emphasize that there was an unauthorized vehicle blocking access to my emergency response vehicle. While waiting for the police, I decided to call our HOA's management company. This is where things got really interesting, the property. Manager Linda was absolutely shocked when I explained what was happening. She confirmed what I already knew. There was no such thing as emergency HOA powers, no approved renovation of the community RV lot, and absolutely no authority for anyone to redesignate private driveways as community parking. But here's the kicker. Linda revealed something that made this whole situation even more bizarre. Karen had actually tried to call the management company earlier that morning, demanding they email her emergency authorization codes for the HOA's official letterhead. When they refused, she apparently threatened to have them fired for insubordination. To the acting president. The police arrived at 10:45 a.m. My security cameras caught Karen's reaction perfectly. She immediately switched from her confident HOA president persona to what I can only describe as a performance worthy of a daytime drama award. As soon as she saw the patrol car, she rushed to greet the officers, waving her stack of papers. The first officer, let's call him Officer Thompson, listened patiently as Karen launched into her elaborate explanation. My driveway camera's audio picked up gems like, "I have emergency authority, and this selfish homeowner is disrupting community harmony." She even tried to show them her homemade citations as proof of her authority. The second officer, Officer Rodriguez, came to speak with me while his partner dealt with Karen. I showed him my property deed, the HOA documents proving my ownership of the driveway and RV pad, and the security footage of everything that had happened that morning. I also showed him the text from the HOA management company confirming that Karen had no authority to do any of this. What happened next was almost comical. Karen had apparently decided that if the police weren't immediately taking her side, they must not understand the complexity of HOA law. She actually pulled out her phone and tried to call her lawyer on speakerphone, except it became clear very quickly that she was just calling a random legal advice hotline. The officers were remarkably professional, but you could see they were struggling to keep straight faces as Karen began reading aloud from what appeared to be a printout of a Wikipedia article about property law. She kept emphasizing phrases like common interest development and community easement rights, clearly having no idea what these terms actually meant. Around 11:00 a.m., a representative from the HOA management company arrived on scene. They brought copies of the actual HOA bylaws and documentation showing that while Karen was indeed on the board, she was actually just the social committee coordinator, not even close to being the president, acting or otherwise. This is when Karen's story started changing. Suddenly, she claimed there had been an emergency phone meeting last night where she was appointed acting president. When asked for minutes or recordings of this supposed meeting, she said it was all verbal and that Robert's Rules of Order allow for undocumented emergency sessions. They don't, by the way. The police officers tried to explain to Karen that regardless of any HOA disputes, she was currently trespassing on private property and needed to move her RV immediately. Her response? She locked herself in her RV and started another Facebook Live video, claiming she was being persecuted for defending homeowners' rights. Meanwhile, more neighbors had gathered to watch the scene unfold. My security cameras caught several of them sharing videos they'd taken of Karen's earlier behavior, including her attempts to direct other RVs onto my property. One neighbor, a retired judge, actually came over to provide a written statement about Karen's previous comments at HOA meetings regarding her plans to redistribute driveway access in the neighborhood. By 11:30 a.m., the officers had had enough. They informed Karen that she had exactly 30 minutes to move her RV voluntarily, or it would be towed at her expense. They also warned her that if she continued to post false claims about having HOA authority, she could face charges for fraud and misrepresentation. Those 30 minutes the police gave Karen turned out to be some of the most intense moments of this whole ordeal. Instead of using this time to simply move her RV, Karen decided to make her final stand. My security cameras captured everything that happened next, and trust me, it's almost unbelievable. First, she started frantically texting people from inside her RV. Within minutes, 3 cars pulled up to my house. Out stepped Karen's husband, looking completely mortified, her adult daughter filming everything on her phone, and, you won't believe this, a guy in a suit who introduced himself as a sovereign citizen legal advocate. Yes, you heard that right. The legal advocate immediately started spouting nonsense about maritime law and how driveways with curved entrances technically count as navigable waterways. The police officers just stood there, looking increasingly done with the whole situation. Officer Thompson actually had to turn away for a moment because he was trying so hard not to laugh. Meanwhile, my emergency pager went off. There was a situation developing in the mountains that required emergency response. I showed the page to Officer Rodriguez, who immediately understood the urgency. He approached Karen's RV and firmly explained that they were now blocking an emergency responder from accessing their vehicle. Karen's response. She stuck her head out of the RV window and yelled, "I don't believe he's really an emergency responder. Where's his uniform?" I was wearing business casual clothes because, I'd been in a video conference all morning while she was blocking my driveway. The fact that my clearly marked emergency response vehicle was visible in my garage apparently didn't count as evidence. The sovereign citizen advocate then pulled out a stack of papers covered in red ink and gold-fringed borders. He started explaining how, according to his interpretation of colonial-era property laws, my driveway was actually part of a common public thoroughfare because it had been built after the Louisiana Purchase. Officer Thompson finally lost it at this point and had to walk away for a moment to compose himself. As the 30-minute deadline approached, Karen's daughter was still live-streaming everything, adding her own commentary. "Mum's taking a stand against driveway inequality. This is what real community leadership looks like." The video comments were split between people telling her how embarrassing this was and other sovereign citizen types offering their own bizarre legal theories. Around this time, my neighbor Tom, who happens to be an actual real estate attorney, came over with copies of the property plat maps dating back to the neighborhood's development. Karen's legal advocate took one look at them and declared them invalid because they didn't have a maritime seal, whatever that means. With 5 minutes left on the deadline, the tow truck arrived. This is when Karen made her boldest move. Yet, she came out of her RV wearing, I kid you not, a makeshift captain's uniform complete with a hat she'd clearly ordered from a costume shop. She announced to everyone present that she was declaring Admiralty jurisdiction over my driveway. The police officers had finally had enough. Officer Rodriguez got on his radio and requested a supervisor, while Officer Thompson started explaining to Karen's husband exactly what charges she might be facing if this continued. The husband looked like he wanted the ground to swallow him whole. That's when my emergency pager went off again, this time with an urgent update about the mountain situation. The police officers immediately switched from patient mode to action mode. Officer Thompson approached Karen's RV one final time. "Ma'am, you are now actively preventing an emergency responder from attending to a potential life and death situation. You have exactly 60 seconds to move your vehicle, or we will forcibly remove you and impound the RV." Karen's response was to start citing the Articles of Confederation, apparently unaware they hadn't been in effect for over 200 years. Her sovereign citizen advisor was frantically flipping through his papers, mumbling something about gold-fringed flags invalidating the police officer's authority. The tension in the air was palpable. My security cameras show at least a dozen neighbors watching from their yards, many recording on their phones. Karen's husband was practically begging her to move the RV, while her daughter continued live streaming, now adding dramatic background music to her commentary. As the final seconds ticked down, we all stood there watching this surreal scene unfold. Would Karen finally see reason? Would the police have to forcibly remove her? And how much more bizarre could this situation possibly get? Well, as it turned out, we were about to find out, because Karen had one final, absolutely outrageous card left to play. Just as the police were about to take action, several important things happened almost simultaneously. My security cameras caught it all, and the timing couldn't have been more perfect for documenting everything that followed. First, 3 members of the actual HOA board arrived on scene. They'd been alerted by the management company and had rushed over from their jobs. The board president, Mike, had even brought official HOA letterhead and the board's seal to prove their legitimacy. The look on Karen's face when she saw them was priceless, especially since she'd been claiming Mike was unreachable on a cruise ship. Second, a local news van pulled up. Apparently, Karen's daughter's live stream had caught the attention of a slow Newsday reporter who decided to check it out. Karen immediately tried to switch into what I can only describe as interview mode, straightening her costume captain's hat and practicing her camera smile. But the third arrival was the most significant. Remember that electrician I mentioned earlier? He showed up with some very interesting documentation. Turns out Karen had called multiple contractors that morning, trying to get someone to override the homeowner's utility connections. He had emails and voicemails from her, specifically requesting quotes for transferring utility control to HOA jurisdiction. The electrician, Dave, has been in business here for 30 years. He addressed everyone present. I've got recordings of this woman trying to authorize unauthorized modifications to private property utilities. In my professional opinion, this could have created serious safety hazards, especially with the emergency response vehicle's dedicated power supply. Karen's sovereign citizen advisor tried to interrupt with something about utility admiralty in law, but Dave wasn't having any of it. He pulled out his contractor's license and started listing all the state and local codes that Karen's plans would have violated. The news reporter was frantically taking notes. The HOA board members then presented their own bombshell. They had emails from Karen from the previous week where she'd actually outlined her plan to reclaim underutilized driveways for community purposes. She had sent these to the wrong email address, typing .com instead of .org for the HOA domain. The board's IT person had discovered them that morning while investigating her claims about emergency powers. My neighbor Sarah, who'd been recording everything since early morning, played back some footage she'd captured of Karen's previous walks around the neighborhood. It showed her measuring various driveways and making notes, all while talking on the phone about Phase 1 of the community redistribution plan. Sarah, bless her heart, had thought Karen was planning a block party or something similarly innocent. Alyssa, news reporter, was getting more interested by the minute. especially when the HOA board revealed that Karen had only lived in the neighborhood for 4 months, not the many years she'd been claiming in her Facebook videos. They also confirmed that her position as social committee coordinator had only been given to her because no one else wanted the job. Then Tom, my real estate attorney neighbor, really turned up the heat. He'd done some quick research and discovered something fascinating. Karen had tried this same stunt in her previous neighborhood in another state. He had pulled up news articles showing how she'd attempted to declare herself emergency HOA manager there during a snowstorm, trying to commandeer people's garages for community storage. The police officers were particularly interested in this information. Officer Thompson stepped away to make some calls, while Officer Rodriguez continued documenting everything with his body camera. The tow truck driver, who'd been waiting patiently this whole time, started preparing his equipment. What really threw Karen off her game was when several members of her own Facebook group showed up, but not to support her. They'd figured out she was lying about her authority and had come to apologize to me for initially believing her. One woman had screenshots of Karen's private messages where she'd been offering to reserve premium driveway spots in exchange for donations to the HOA emergency fund, which of course didn't exist. The sovereign citizen advisor, sensing the tide turning, quietly packed up his gold-fringed papers and slipped away. Karen's husband looked like he was about to have a nervous breakdown, especially when someone mentioned potential legal liability for attempted utility fraud. As all this was unfolding, my emergency pager went off for a third time. The situation in the mountains was escalating, and now there were multiple agencies calling for additional responders. The news reporter, hearing the urgent beeps, turned her camera toward my still-blocked emergency vehicle, adding a whole new dimension to the story she was covering. With the emergency situation becoming more urgent and all the new evidence coming to light, everything started happening very quickly. The police supervisor had arrived on scene, assessed the situation, and made an executive decision. My security cameras captured the exact moment when he approached Karen's RV with his final warning. "Ma'am, this is your absolute last chance to move your vehicle voluntarily," he announced, his voice firm but professional. "We have documented evidence of attempted utility fraud, false impersonation of HOA officials, and obstruction of emergency services. If you do not move your RV immediately, you will be removed from the vehicle and arrested." Karen, still clinging to her captain's costume and maritime law defense, made what turned out to be a catastrophically bad decision. She actually tried to start her RV, not to leave, but to position it even more firmly across my driveway. The engine roared to life, and for a terrifying moment, it looked like she might hit either my garage or one of the police vehicles. That's when the supervisor gave the signal. 2 officers approached the RV's door, while others secured the perimeter. Karen's daughter was still live-streaming, providing a running commentary that had now attracted thousands of viewers. "They're violating maritime law, Mum's making a stand." For driveway equality, the HOA board president Mike had seen enough. He stepped forward with an official letter he'd just drafted. "As of this moment, Karen, last name, is formally removed from all HOA positions and committees, effective immediately, for gross misconduct and misrepresentation of authority." The news crew was capturing everything, including the moment when Karen's husband finally snapped. He walked up to the RV, used his spare key to unlock the door, and practically begged her to come out. "Please, Karen, this has gone too far. You're about to get arrested over a driveway. Think about what this will do to your real estate license." That last bit was news to everyone. Apparently, Karen was a licensed real estate agent. The news reporter's eyes lit up at this additional detail, and she immediately started making calls to the state licensing board. Meanwhile, my security cameras caught Karen trying to delete her Facebook videos and social media posts through her phone. Fortunately, several neighbors had already downloaded copies of everything, including her live streams, where she admitted to planning this whole scheme. The tow truck driver had positioned his vehicle and was preparing to begin the removal process when Karen finally cracked. She threw open the RV door, but instead of surrendering peacefully, she launched into what I can only describe as a prepared speech. As acting admiral of this maritime vessel, I hereby declare this driveway international waters. I demand to see a flag with gold fringe. I do not recognize the authority of any non-admiralty court. She was reading this off note cards, complete with maritime law citations she'd apparently gotten from her sovereign citizen advisor. The police supervisor, demonstrating remarkable patience, tried one last time. "Ma'am, you're blocking access to an emergency response vehicle during an active emergency. This has gone from a simple parking violation to a serious criminal matter." That's when my emergency radio crackled to life, loud enough for everyone to hear. The mountain rescue situation had escalated to a multi-agency response, and they were specifically calling for additional EMTs. The supervisor made a quick decision. "Begin arrest procedures," he ordered. 2 officers approached the RV while others maintained the perimeter. Karen's daughter was still filming, though her commentary had shifted from righteous indignation to increasingly nervous questions about bail bondsmen. The scene that followed was captured perfectly by multiple cameras. My security system, the K2 news crew, police body cams, and various neighbors' phones. Karen, still in her captain's costume, was escorted from her RV while quoting maritime law and demanding to see everyone's admiralty credentials. The tow truck operator, who'd seen plenty of strange situations in his career, later told me this was a first even for him. He had to maneuver very carefully to avoid damaging either my property or Karen's RV, all while she shouted about maritime salvage rights from the back of the police car. As the RV was finally being prepared for towing, the electrician Dave made a discovery that would later prove crucial in court. He found evidence that Karen had actually tried to splice into my RV pad's electrical system earlier that morning, before I'd caught her. The amateur attempt could have caused a serious electrical fire, just when everyone thought the situation was finally under control. Things took an even more dramatic turn. As the tow truck operator was preparing to move Karen's RV, her maritime law advisor suddenly reappeared, this time with 3 other sovereign citizen legal experts in matching captain's hats. My security cameras caught their arrival in a beat-up van covered in bizarre legal quotes and gold fringe. The police supervisor took one look at this new development and immediately called for backup. But before the additional units could arrive, these self-proclaimed admiralty lawyers started plastering my driveway with homemade maritime law notices. They had actual rolls of red tape that they were using to create what they called an admiralty jurisdiction boundary. Karen, still in the back of the police car, was practically bouncing with excitement when she saw her reinforcements arrive. She started shouting legal terms through the window. "Notice the gold fringe. We have established maritime jurisdiction. The tow truck now requires a sailing license." The news crew, who had been about to pack up and leave, quickly set up their equipment again. The reporter couldn't believe her luck. This story just kept getting better. She was already calling it the Great Driveway Mutiny of Summit Ridge. That's when one of the sovereign citizen advisors pulled out what he claimed was an international maritime emergency override device. It was clearly just a regular car alarm key fob with some gold paint and official-looking stickers on it. He pointed it at Karen's RV and started clicking it frantically, insisting that it would activate the maritime protection field. The police officers were trying their best to maintain professional composure, but you could see them struggling not to laugh. Officer Thompson actually had to walk away for a moment when one of the advisors started reading maritime distress. Signals from a children's pirate book. The HOA board members, still on scene, were frantically documenting everything. Mike, the board president, was already drafting new bylaws specifically prohibiting claims of maritime jurisdiction over residential driveways. He turned to me and said, "In 20 years on the board, I never thought we'd need a rule about this." The tow truck operator, a veteran with decades of experience, had seen enough. He started the winch system, preparing to move the RV. That's when Karen's maritime advisors formed a human chain around the vehicle, claiming they were establishing a sea-based blockade. Officer Rodriguez approached them with admirable professionalism. "Gentlemen, if you don't disperse immediately, you'll all be joining your client in custody. Maritime law does not apply to residential driveways in Colorado." One advisor responded by pulling out a compass and attempting to prove that my driveway was pointing in a nautical direction. Another started throwing pieces of paper that he claimed were maritime confetti, which would establish nautical sovereignty. The situation reached peak absurdity when Karen's daughter, still live streaming, started playing sea shanties through a portable speaker. Her commentary had evolved into what she called a maritime resistance soundtrack. That's when my emergency radio crackled again with an urgent update about the mountain rescue situation. The supervisor had heard enough. He gave a signal, and additional officers moved in to remove the maritime law advocates from my driveway. As they were being led away, one of them threw what he called a sovereign citizen smoke bomb. It turned out to be a handful of glitter, which the wind immediately blew back into his own face. The news crew caught every sparkly moment. Karen, watching her last hope of maritime defense being led away in handcuffs, finally broke down and admitted something shocking. My security cameras caught her confession perfectly. "Okay, fine. I was just mad because they rejected my offer on this house 3 years ago." The maritime law stuff was all from a YouTube video. The police supervisor, speaking directly to the news camera, summed it up perfectly. "In my 23 years of law enforcement, this is the first time I've had to deal with a maritime law claim involving a residential driveway, an RV, and an HOA power struggle. This will definitely be included in our training materials." As the sovereign citizen advisors were being processed by the police, officers found dozens of similar maritime law packages in their van, along with receipts showing they'd been selling these legal services to people across the country. This discovery would later lead to a much larger investigation. The tow truck finally began moving Karen's RV, which set off another round of maritime law citations from the back of the police car. She was now demanding to be transported to a maritime detention facility and insisted that her captain's hat gave her sovereign immunity from landlocked jurisdictions. Once Karen and her maritime law advisors were taken away and the RV was finally towed, the full extent of the damage became apparent. My security cameras continued recording as various experts assessed the situation. What they found was far worse than anyone expected. The electrician, Dave, did a complete inspection of my RV pad's utility connections. He discovered that Karen's amateur attempt to access the power supply had actually damaged the safety ground system. "If someone had plugged an RV in after this tampering," he explained to the police, "it could have energized the entire vehicle's frame. We're talking potentially lethal electrical hazards." The concrete specialist who installed my stamped driveway came out to document the damage. Karen's RV had left deep gouges in the decorative surface, and her maritime law advisor's red tape had actually pulled off some of the protective sealant. But the worst damage came from whatever they'd used to make their maritime boundary. It had chemically reacted with the concrete surface and left permanent staining. My landscaper arrived to assess the damage to the garden areas. Karen's admiralty Border Patrol had trampled through my native plant garden, destroying years of careful cultivation. They'd also knocked over and broken several of the security cameras mounting poles while trying to establish their maritime perimeter. The HOA board members were still on scene, documenting everything for their records. Mike, the board president, was particularly interested in the papers Karen had dropped during her arrest. Among them were detailed plans for what she called Phase 2. Apparently, she had identified several other driveways in the neighborhood that she planned to commandeer for community use. The news crew was interviewing neighbors who had witnessed everything. Sarah, my next-door neighbor, shared her security camera footage showing Karen practicing her maritime authority speech in her own driveway the night before. She was out, there at midnight, wearing that captain's hat, rehearsing with a megaphone, Sarah told the reporter. We thought she was practicing for a community theater production. Karen's daughter had finally stopped live streaming, but the damage was done. Her videos had gone viral in the sovereign citizen community, leading to an influx of bizarre comments and theories on our neighborhood's social media pages. The HOA's IT person had to temporarily shut down their Facebook group due to hundreds of posts about maritime driveway rights. The tow truck operator called from the impound lot with more discoveries. Karen had equipped her RV with what he called a sovereign citizen modification package, including removable maritime flags, a fake ship's wheel attached to the steering wheel, and a cabinet full of official-looking but completely nonsensical maritime driveway permits. My emergency response team coordinator arrived to check on the damaged utility connections for my response vehicle. He was furious when he saw the extent of the tampering. This could have delayed response times to multiple emergencies, he documented in his official report. Intentionally disabling emergency response equipment is a serious offense. The police, evidence technicians were particularly interested in Karen's official HOA documents. They found that she had actually created an elaborate fake HOA seal using rubber stamps and gold paint. She had an entire box of pre-stamped blank emergency authorization forms in her RV, apparently planning to expand her driveway commandeering scheme. Karen's husband, who had remained on scene to deal with the RV towing paperwork, finally broke down and revealed more details. She's been planning this for months, he admitted to the officers. She joined every sovereign citizen Facebook group she could find, ordered all these maritime law books. I thought it was just a weird hobby until this morning when she put on that captain's hat and said she was taking control of the neighborhood's nautical assets. The local news had called in their legal expert to comment on the situation. He could barely keep a straight face as he explained why maritime law doesn't apply to residential driveways in Colorado. This is going to be a case study in my law classes for years to come, he told the reporter. I've never seen someone try to claim admiralty jurisdiction over a landlocked property, let alone use it as justification for RV parking. By late afternoon, various inspectors and insurance adjusters were taking detailed photographs and measurements of all the damage. The preliminary estimates were shocking. Between the damaged concrete, destroyed landscaping, compromised electrical systems, and broken security equipment, we were looking at tens of thousands of dollars in repairs. The next morning, my lawyer's office looked like a command center. We had multiple screens displaying security footage, stacks of Karen's fake HOA documents, and printouts of her social media posts covering every surface. The legal implications of everything that had happened were staggering. First, there were the criminal charges. The police detective assigned to the case laid them out. Attempted utility theft, criminal mischief, impersonating an HOA official. Apparently that's a real charge in our state. Interference with emergency services, and criminal trespassing. But that was just the beginning. The State Real Estate Commission had gotten involved after seeing the news coverage. Karen's attempts to redistribute private property while holding a real estate license raised serious ethical concerns. They launched an immediate investigation into whether she had tried similar schemes in her professional capacity. My insurance company's legal team was particularly interested in the maritime law aspect. They'd never dealt with someone trying to claim admiralty jurisdiction over a residential driveway, and they were determined to set a clear legal precedent to prevent future copycat incidents. Security cameras caught these protesters trying to recreate their version of the Boston Tea Party in my driveway. They brought boxes labeled tyrannical land laws and attempted to dump them in the maritime jurisdiction, which basically meant throwing empty cardboard boxes around my property while singing sea shanties. The HOA had to hire security guards after Karen's sovereign citizen friends started showing up at board meetings, demanding to be heard under maritime parliamentary procedure. One of them brought a toy parrot that he insisted was his maritime legal advisor. The HOA minutes from these meetings are absolutely priceless. Things escalated when Karen attempted to file her own lawsuit, written entirely in nautical terms. The court clerk's office was baffled by a document titled Maritime Declaration of Driveway Independence. She had even drawn little anchors in the margins and insisted that the court had to consider her case because the paper she used was blue, like the ocean. The local news couldn't get enough of the story. They ran a special segment called Driveway Pirates of Colorado when HOAs go maritime. Karen's daughter was still trying to spin everything positively on social media, now calling her mother a crusader for driveway rights, and selling T-shirts with slogans like, "My driveway identifies as international waters." My neighbors started receiving strange letters from Karen's Admiralty Chamber of Driveway Affairs. These documents claimed that all residential driveways in the neighborhood were now under maritime jurisdiction and subject to nautical parking regulations. The police had to issue a community alert explaining that these notices had no legal validity. The situation got even more bizarre when Karen's maritime law advisors started offering sovereign citizen certification courses in the parking lot of a local strip mall. They had set up a fake ship's wheel and were charging people $500 for official maritime driveway captain licenses. The city had to shut them down for operating without a business license. My security system caught Karen attempting to conduct maritime surveillance of my property. She would drive by slowly in her husband's car, her RV was still impounded, wearing her captain's hat and taking photos while narrating into a voice recorder about suspicious landlocked activities. The HOA management company discovered that Karen had actually created an elaborate alternate reality about the neighborhood's history. She had written a completely fictional account claiming that our subdivision was built on an ancient nautical trading route which supposedly gave it special maritime status. She had even created fake historical documents complete with poorly photoshopped images of ships sailing through what is now our neighborhood. One morning, I woke up to find that someone had installed a fake lighthouse on the corner of my property. It was made of cardboard and had maritime navigation aid written on it in glitter pen. The security footage showed Karen's maritime law advisors setting it up at 3 a.m. while discussing the importance of proper nautical signaling in residential zones. The electrical company sent out another inspector after receiving bizarre requests from Karen. She'd been calling them daily, insisting that they needed to install maritime-grade power outlets on all RV pads in the neighborhood. She had even created her own electrical certification documents, which she claimed were valid under international sea power regulations. My lawyer received a package from Karen containing what she called maritime mediation materials. Inside was a toy boat filled with monopoly money, which she claimed represented Admiralty compensation for using my driveway. The accompanying letter explained that under maritime law, this payment in sovereign vessel currency legally entitled her to park her RV on my property. The city council had to hold a special session to address the growing number of maritime driveway claims inspired by Karen's case. Apparently, several other sovereign citizens had begun declaring their driveways independent maritime territories. The council ended up passing an ordinance specifically stating that residential driveways cannot be classified as navigable waterways. The situation finally started moving toward resolution when multiple agencies coordinated their responses. The district attorney's office took the lead, combining all the various complaints and violations into one comprehensive case. They brought in experts from different fields to document everything properly. First, they had the county surveyor come out to officially document my property boundaries. This was necessary because Karen had started claiming that property lines don't apply under maritime law. The surveyor's report included a particularly amusing note. Client requested confirmation that property is not and has never been a navigable waterway. Confirmed, this is a residential driveway in Colorado. The FBI's investigation into the sovereign citizen group revealed something interesting. Karen's maritime law advisors were running a nationwide scam, selling fake maritime jurisdiction packages to HOA members across the country. They had an entire network of people claiming driveways as sovereign maritime territory. The evidence from my case helped break open their entire operation. The State Real Estate Commission launched a formal investigation into Karen's professional conduct. They discovered that she had been adding bizarre maritime clauses to her real estate contracts, claiming that all properties she sold came with admiralty parking rights. Several of her previous clients came forward with stories about her trying to convince them that their driveways were actually inland ports. nautical access requirements, all of this documentation was necessary. Because, as my lawyer explained, we need to make sure this case sets a clear precedent that residential driveways cannot be claimed as maritime territory, no matter how many captain's hats someone owns. Just when we thought things couldn't get more bizarre, Karen launched what she called her maritime defense campaign. My security cameras caught her latest attempt to reassert her claimed authority over my driveway, and this time, she'd really outdone herself. At 5 a.m. on a Tuesday morning, a rental truck pulled up near my property. Out jumped Karen, still wearing her captain's hat, along with 5 people in matching sailor costumes. They quickly began unloading what appeared to be a life-sized replica of a ship's helm, complete with a steering wheel and brass fittings. Their plan, as documented by both my cameras and several bewildered neighbors' phones, was to install this helm at the entrance to my driveway. Karen could be heard explaining to her crew that this would officially establish maritime governance over the property. They had even brought fake navigation charts and a compass. The police arrived just as they were attempting to anchor the helm to my driveway using industrial adhesive. Karen's immediate response was to pull out a new document she called her Maritime Emergency Powers Amendment. It was written in blue glitter pen on parchment paper and had various nautical stickers all over it. Officer Thompson, who had handled the original incident, just sighed and said, "Ma'am, we've been through this. Your captain's hat does not give you maritime jurisdiction over residential property." Karen's response. She pulled out a second captain's hat and tried to place it on the officer's head, claiming this would transfer admiralty authority. But the real surprise came when the officers ran the rental truck's plates. It turned out Karen had rented it using a fake maritime driver's license she had created. The rental company was not amused when they discovered their truck had been obtained with documents featuring drawings of anchors and phrases like valid in all nautical territories. Meanwhile, Karen's social media campaign had taken an even stranger turn. She had started a TikTok channel called Captain Karen's Driveway Liberation Fleet, where she posted videos of herself planning what she called Operation Parking Freedom. Her followers, mostly other sovereign citizens, had started sending her miniature boats to expand her naval force. The HOA management company received a peculiar package from Karen that morning. Inside was a detailed proposal for converting all neighborhood driveways into what she called dry docks for land vessels. The document included hand-drawn pictures of RVs with sails attached to them and a request to install wave machines in all cul-de-sacs. My lawyer contacted me in disbelief. After receiving Karen's latest legal filing, she had submitted a motion to the court, requesting that all proceedings be conducted under maritime law protocols. This included a demand that the judge wear a captain's hat and that all legal documents be printed on blue paper to represent the sovereign seas. The most concerning development came when my security cameras caught Karen attempting to install what she called a maritime toll booth at the end of my driveway. She had actually created fake parking tickets that looked like ships' cargo manifests and planned to charge people for nautical passage rights. Her husband, looking increasingly exhausted, finally snapped when Karen announced her plans to paint their entire house to look like a lighthouse. He was caught on my cameras pleading with her, "Karen, please, our insurance won't cover maritime-themed renovations. We don't live in a harbor." The FBI's investigation revealed that Karen had started conducting maritime law seminars in her garage. She was charging other sovereign citizens $1,000 for a captain's certification in driveway admiralty law. The course materials included a handmade compass, a bag of maritime confetti, and a manual titled How to Convert Your HOA into a Naval Fleet. Local news stations picked up the story again when Karen attempted to register her RV, still impounded, as a land-based maritime vessel with the Department of Motor Vehicles. She had created her own registration forms featuring pictures of anchors and quotes from Pirates of the Caribbean movies. The court date finally arrived, and it was everything you might expect and more. Karen showed up in full maritime regalia, not just her signature captain's hat, but a complete captain's uniform, with gold epaulettes and a toy parrot on her shoulder that she insisted was her maritime legal counsel, the courthouse security. Footage, which my lawyer later obtained, shows Karen attempting to enter the courtroom while throwing maritime confetti and declaring, "I hereby christen this court a nautical tribunal." The bailiff's incident report noted that she also tried to hang a ship's wheel on the judge's bench to establish proper maritime authority. The judge, who had clearly read through the case files, took one look at Karen's outfit and simply said, "Mrs. Last Name, this is a district court in Colorado. We will be proceeding under state law, not maritime law, and the parrot will need to wait outside." Karen's response was to present the judge with a homemade Admiral's Commission she had created using glitter glue and stickers. The district attorney's presentation of evidence took over 3 hours, simply because there was so much to cover. They had organized everything into categories. Exhibit A, the original incident, security camera footage, police body cam videos, neighbor testimonies, emergency response records. Exhibit B, property damage, electrical system tampering, driveway destruction, landscaping damage, security system interference. Exhibit C, false documents, fake HOA papers, maritime jurisdiction claims, counterfeit permits, fraudulent utility requests. The real entertainment began when Karen's sovereign citizen legal team tried to present their defense. They had prepared what they called a maritime defense portfolio, which included a hand-drawn map claiming Colorado was actually underwater millions of years ago, pictures of boats with RVs poorly photoshopped onto them, a scientific paper. They'd written about driveway fluid dynamics, a petition signed by other sovereign citizens declaring all driveways potential waterways. The judge's patience was tested when Karen's lead advisor attempted to argue that the court's jurisdiction wasn't valid because the American flag in the courtroom had a gold fringe, which he claimed made it a maritime flag. The judge's response was one for the record books. "Sir, the presence or absence of fringe on the flag has no bearing on this court's authority to hear cases about driveway disputes in Colorado." Karen's daughter attempted to live stream the proceedings while adding sea shanty background music, but was quickly shut down by court security. She then tried to argue that her social media followers constituted a maritime jury of peers. The turning point came when the prosecutor played a compilation of Karen's social media videos, showing her elaborate planning and admission of trying to take revenge for her rejected house offer years ago. The judge's expression during the video, where Karen explained her maritime driveway liberation theory, was priceless. Things got even more interesting when Karen tried to cross-examine witnesses while using nautical terms. She asked my electrician if he was certified in maritime electrical protocols and demanded to know if my security cameras were registered with the Admiralty Office of Surveillance. The HOA board president's testimony was particularly compelling. He presented a timeline of Karen's escalating behavior from her first mention of community property redistribution to her final attempts to declare herself Supreme Admiral of Residential Waterways. The court recorder had to ask him several times to repeat quotes because they seemed too outlandish to be real. The judge's patience finally reached its limit when Karen tried to present her maritime expert witness, another sovereign citizen who claimed to be a doctor of driveway nautical studies from an online university he'd created himself. The judge's response This court does not recognize degrees in driveway maritime law from websites created last Tuesday. The prosecution's closing argument was straightforward and devastating. They methodically outlined every violation, every act of damage, and every false claim Karen had made. They particularly emphasized how her actions had interfered with emergency services and potentially put lives at risk. Karen's closing argument, on the other hand, consisted mainly of her reading passages from what appeared to be a mix of maritime law books and pirate adventure novels, while her sovereign citizen advisors hummed sea shanties in the background. The judge's ruling came with some serious financial consequences for Karen. The breakdown of damages and penalties was extensive, and watching Karen's face as each amount was read out was quite something, especially since she kept insisting that maritime currency should be accepted as legal tender. The property damage costs were substantial. Driveway repair and resurfacing, $18,500. Electrical system repairs, $12,000. Landscaping restoration, $7,800. Security system replacement, $5,400. Emergency vehicle recertification, $3,200. Total physical damages, $46,900. But that was just the beginning. The judge then moved on to the fines and penalties. Interference with emergency services, $25,000. Criminal trespassing, $5,000. Utility tampering, $10,000. False impersonation of HOA official, $7,500. Filing false documents, $5,000. Total fines, $50,500. Karen tried to argue that these amounts should be paid in what she called sovereign maritime credits, basically monopoly money she had modified, with nautical stickers. The judge was not amused, especially when she pulled out a treasure chest full of chocolate coins as alternate payment. The civil penalties were next. HOA legal fees, $15,000. Property owners' legal fees, $22,000. Court costs, $5,500. Document filing fees, $2,800. Total civil costs, $45,300. Then came the restitution orders, emergency services compensation, $8,500. Neighbor property damages, $3,200. City administrative costs, $4,700. HOA administrative costs, $2,900. Total restitution, $19,300. Karen's sovereign citizen advisors tried to present what they called a maritime bankruptcy declaration, a document written in blue crayon on the back of a pirate-themed restaurant placemat. The judge simply added it to the growing pile of evidence for the FBI's investigation into their operation. The professional consequences were adding up too. Real estate license suspended pending investigation. HOA position terminated. Insurance policies cancelled. Rental contracts voided when the judge ordered her RV to remain impounded until all fees were paid. Karen actually tried to claim maritime salvage rights on her own vehicle. The judge's response, misses a last name, for the last time your RV is not a seafaring vessel, and this court does not recognize your self-appointed admiralty authority. The financial hits kept coming. Towing and impound fees, $3,800. Storage fees, accumulating daily, $2,400. Vehicle registration reinstatement, $2,500. Required remedial driving courses, $800. Total vehicle-related costs, $8,500. Karen's attempt to pay these fees with hand-drawn maritime bonds led to additional contempt charges. She had actually created an entire series of these bonds, featuring pictures of her RV with sails attached and promises to pay in sovereign citizen seafarer currency. The insurance companies had their own demands. Property insurance claims, $35,000. Liability coverage claims, $28,000. Policy cancellation fees, $3,500. Total insurance impacts, $66,500. The grand total was staggering, $238,000. Karen's reaction was to declare herself a maritime bankruptcy sovereign and attempt to pay the entire amount with a homemade Admiral's promissory note that she had written on the back of a nautical chart. To make matters worse, Karen's Maritime Defense Fund, a GoFundMe she had set up to cover her legal costs, was shut down after it was discovered she was promising donors maritime nobility titles and sovereign citizen captain certifications in exchange for contributions. The fee, judge ordered a payment plan, specifically noting that all payments must be made in actual US currency, not maritime tokens, sovereign citizen certificates, or any form of self-created nautical tender. Karen's response was to submit a payment schedule written in maritime signal flags. The aftermath of the maritime driveway incident led to some significant changes in our community. The HOA board, determined to prevent any similar situations, implemented what became known as the Captain Karen Protocols, a comprehensive set of new rules and procedures that other HOAs across the state would later adopt. First, they completely revamped the HOA leadership structure. New requirements included background checks for all board members, verification of all claimed credentials, mandatory training on property law, clear documentation of authority limits, regular audits of all official communications. The neighborhood's security systems got a major upgrade. My incident inspired several changes: new cameras at all entrance points, emergency vehicle access protocols, improved lighting systems, digital documentation systems, 24/7 monitoring service. The most amusing change was to the HOA's official documents. They now included specific clauses stating this HOA explicitly rejects all claims of maritime jurisdiction over residential properties, regardless of the presence of captain's hats, ship wheels, or self-declared admiralty authority. The City Council used our case to create new ordinances, clear definitions of private driveway rights, specific penalties for false HOA claims, emergency vehicle access requirements, restrictions on sovereign citizen activities, protection of property owner rights. The police department actually created a training module based on the incident. They called it Land, Sea and Sovereign Citizens, a case study in residential maritime claims. Officers from other jurisdictions started coming to learn about handling maritime law claims on land, dealing with sovereign citizen tactics, protecting emergency service access, managing social media incidents, documenting bizarre behavior. Insurance companies across the state updated their policies to specifically exclude self-declared maritime jurisdiction, sovereign citizen activities, unauthorized HOA actions, RV naval vessel claims. Maritime law seminars. The local real estate board made changes to new ethics training requirements, specific rules about property rights, clear definitions of HOA authority, documentation requirements, client protection protocols. Our neighborhood's reputation changed in unexpected ways. We became known as the community that stood up to sovereign citizens, a model for HOA governance reform, a case study in property rights, the place where Captain Karen made her stand. The neighborhood with the maritime driveway incident, local. Businesses even got involved. The hardware store started offering what they called their anti-maritime security package: extra strong driveway gates, security camera systems, motion sensor lights, property boundary markers, no sovereign citizen signs. The community's response was fascinating. Regular neighborhood watch meetings now included sovereign citizen awareness training, property rights education, emergency response protocols, documentation procedures, social media monitoring. The HOA's legal team developed a new emergency response plan, immediate legal intervention protocols, evidence-gathering procedures, communication guidelines, media response strategies, resident protection measures. Karen's former home, which went up for Saleh, Got some interesting new disclosures. No maritime law claims permitted. Property governed by state law only. HOA authority clearly defined. No sovereign citizen activities. Standard driveway use only. The community newsletter now includes a regular feature. Updates on property rights, HOA authority clarifications, emergency response information, security system recommendations, legal awareness tips. Even the annual HOA meeting format changed. Clear authority verification, recorded proceedings, legal, counsel present, security measures in place, documentation requirements. The incident even affected local property values, but not in the way you might expect. Our neighborhood became known for strong property rights protection, effective HOA management, good emergency service access, clear legal boundaries, community solidarity. The final resolution of the maritime driveway incident came with some unexpected twists. Karen's life changed dramatically after the court's ruling, and the ripple effects spread far beyond our neighborhood. First, Karen's real estate license was permanently revoked. The state licensing board's report was particularly scathing, noting that someone who cannot distinguish between a residential driveway and international waters should not be trusted with property transactions. They discovered she had been adding bizarre maritime clauses to her real estate contracts for months. Her sovereign citizen legal team faced their own consequences. The FBI's investigation revealed their nationwide scam of selling maritime jurisdiction packages to HOA members. They had actually created a whole franchise system, complete with maritime law certification courses, captain's hat hierarchies, sovereign citizen training manuals, fake Admiralty Court documents, DIY maritime jurisdiction kits. Karen's husband finally reached his breaking point. My security cameras caught him removing all nautical decorations from their house at 3 a.m., including 17 ship's wheels, 12 anchor ornaments, 3 fake lighthouses, a crow's nest he'd been forced to build, various maritime flags, the RV that started it all. It remained impounded until Karen's husband finally sold it to pay the legal fees. The new owner was highly amused to find a captain's chair instead of a driver's seat, maritime navigation charts covering the walls, a ship's bell instead of a horn, emergency flares in all the cupboards, a hand-painted SS sovereign citizen name on the side. Karen's social media empire crumbled spectacularly. Her various groups and channels were shut down after multiple complaints about false legal advice, fraudulent maritime certificates, fake HOA authority claims, sovereign citizen recruitment, driveway liberation propaganda. The most surprising outcome was that Karen actually became a case study in several law schools. Professors now use the maritime driveway defense as an example of sovereign citizen tactics, HOA authority abuse, property rights violations, legal system manipulation, social media evidence. Her daughter's live stream archives became training material for law enforcement agencies, HOA management companies, property rights attorneys, emergency response teams, social media managers. Karen's marriage didn't survive the aftermath. Her husband's divorce filing cited irreconcilable differences regarding maritime law application to residential properties. He specifically requested custody of their regular vehicle, non-maritime, house, land-based, normal clothing, no captain's attire, regular furniture, no ship's wheels, standard documentation, no maritime certificates. The FBI's investigation led to a broader crackdown on sovereign citizen scams. They discovered an entire underground network of maritime law experts, driveway liberation specialists, HOA takeover consultants, sovereign citizen coaches. Maritime jurisdiction advisors Karen herself went through several phases after the court ruling. Initial denial, still wearing the captain's hat. Anger, writing maritime protest songs. Bargaining, offering maritime nobility titles. Depression, writing sad sea shanties. Acceptance, finally returning to land law. The last time anyone in the neighborhood saw Karen, she was loading up a moving truck bound for Florida. She had apparently decided to live somewhere with actual waterways, though her husband's attorney made sure the divorce settlement specified she couldn't claim maritime jurisdiction over their former house, convert any more driveways into ports, issue maritime parking permits, conduct sovereign citizen seminars, create new admiralty courts. The story even made it into a legal textbook chapter titled Modern Applications of Maritime Law, What Not to Do. Law students now study our case to understand proper jurisdiction limits, property rights enforcement, HOA authority boundaries, emergency service access rights, social media evidence preservation, and that's the story of how my driveway briefly became an attempted maritime territory. You know, looking back at all the security footage and documentation now, it's almost hard to believe this actually happened. But I've got everything saved, from Karen's original maritime declaration to the final court documents. Speaking of documentation, a lot of you have been asking about the security camera system I used to catch all this craziness. I'm going to put links in the description to the exact setup I have. After this incident, about half the neighborhood bought the same system. I guess nobody wants to be caught off guard by sovereign citizen maritime claims. Now, before we wrap this up, I want to share a quick update that just happened last week. Remember Karen's maritime law advisors? Well, apparently, they've started a YouTube channel called Sovereign Seas, The Truth About Driveway Rights. They're still trying to sell their maritime jurisdiction packages, but now they're using my story as a what to expect when claiming your maritime freedom. I couldn't make this stuff up if I tried. Some of you have asked what happened to the ship's wheel that Karen tried to install in my driveway. The police actually kept it as evidence, but they recently returned it to me. I'm thinking of mounting it on my garage wall with a plaque that reads SS No Trespassing. Might as well have a sense of humor about the whole thing. For those wondering about my emergency response work, I'm happy to report that the new gate, system and security measures have actually improved our response times. The HOA even created a special emergency vehicle access protocol that's being adopted by other communities. So, I guess some good came out of this whole maritime madness. If you're dealing with your own HOA issues or difficult neighbors, here's my advice: document everything, know your rights, and maybe invest in a good security camera system. Oh, and if someone shows up in your driveway wearing a captain's hat and talking about maritime law, start recording immediately. Now here's where I need your help. In the comments below, I want to hear your craziest HOA or neighbor stories. Have you ever dealt with someone trying to claim special jurisdiction over your property? Any sovereign citizens in your neighborhood? Share your stories below, though I doubt anyone can top Captain Karen and her maritime driveway claims. Also, if you enjoyed this story about residential maritime law gone wrong, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. I've got more crazy stories coming up, including one about a neighbor who tried to declare their treehouse an independent nation, but that's a story for another video. For all the legal professionals watching, yes, I got permission from my lawyer to share all these details. And for any sovereign citizens watching, no, my driveway is still not a maritime territory, and no, I'm not accepting applications for maritime parking permits. Quick shout out to my neighbors who helped document everything and supported me through this whole ordeal. Special thanks to Sarah for her excellent maritime confetti cleanup skills, and to Tom for his legal expertise. You guys are the real MVPs of this story. And hey, If you're part of an HOA board watching this, feel free to use our new maritime law prohibition clause. My lawyer says we can share it. Just make sure to credit it as the Captain Karen Memorial Bylaw. Before we end this video, let me know in the comments, what would you have done if someone tried to claim maritime jurisdiction over your driveway? Would you have handled it differently? Drop some anchor emojis if you made it to the end of this crazy tale. Next week's video is going to be about the time someone tried to claim my garden gnomes were running an unauthorized neighborhood watch program. Trust me, you won't want to miss that one. Remember to ring that bell so you don't miss any future stories about sovereign citizens, crazy neighbors, and yes, more maritime law adventures, though hopefully not in my driveway again. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.